Yes, Dr. Mandal.
Yes, yes. Good morning.
Very loud and clear.
Good morning.
Oh.
Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Upinder.
Yeah, welcome to the conference.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a delight.
And also to India virtually.
We are having some little bit problem with connectivity with some of the other gates. We'll just get back. Just 1 minute.
अलग-अलग मेल में टाइमिंग के हिसाब से उसमें ऊपर देखो ना और फुल में था तो ऊपर ने कितना बजे अंदर में मीटिंग स्टार्ट थे और फुल में बिहार एक्चुअली की 8:30 ये दोनों में से कुछ नहीं कर बजे तो ये मिसमन के कंसर्न बच्चे को बुलाएं
सर श्रीवास्तव जी से बात किया अभी उनको उनकी आवाज नहीं आ रही उनको हमारी आवाज मिल रही है अभी वो देख रहे हैं हम मैं भी एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर को बताता हूँ
Am I visible?
Now it is okay.
Yes, now you are audible. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. I think Mr. Argal ji is also there.
Yes, I am there.
Oh, thank you so much, sir. Thank you for joining.
What about Prabhat Pankaj?
Prabhat has not yet joined, I think. Just 1 minute. He is there. He is there. Mr. Dr. Pankaj, are you around?
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome.
Yeah. Good morning, sir. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good, sir. I'm good. So good to see you after a long time.
yeah. Same here.
And you're as fresh as vegetable.
Oh yes, one has to be fresh. Fresh and happy.
Fresh and happy, yes. And good morning, Dr. Mandal. We have been speaking over phone, but not
Absolutely.
able to connect.
Yes.
And
it's
other friends, I can see I would like to get introduced to them as well. So good morning to all of you.
Pleasure.
Good morning, Limpo Norbu Wangchuk, sir. Good morning,
Dr. Prabhat. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning from India, and good to see you, sir. And we are very grateful that you have been able to adjust your schedule to make yourself available today. So we are really grateful.
Thank you, Dr. Pankaj. Looking forward to this conference.
Yes, sir. So happiness is catching up, and your contribution is an immense contribution you have made to this field.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Wangchuk. Good morning, Dr. Pankaj.
Good morning.
Dr. George, Director Chief. Yeah.
Good morning, Dr. George. Yeah. Very nice meeting you, sir.
Morning, Mr. Wangchuk.
Good morning, Dr. George.
Thank you. Thank you.
Professor Mandal, we should start now.
Yes, sir. Now I think we should start. Anu?
Yes, sir. A positive attitude will lead to a positive outcome. The positive thinker sees the invisible, feels the intangible, and achieves the impossible. Good morning, all. We are honored to have with us Chief Guest Shri Manoj Srivastava, Additional Chief Secretary and Chairman, Executive Council, Raj Anand Sansthan MP. Special guest Shri Norbu Wangchuk, former Education Minister, Royal Government of Bhutan, Dr. Rupinder Dhar, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Shri Vaishnav Vidyapith Vishwavidyalaya, Dr. T.K. Mandal, Head, Center of Excellence in Happiness Studies, Coordinator, SVSL, and Professor, Shri Vaishnav School of Management, Convener, Anand Amrit 2020. On behalf of Shri Vaishnav Vidyapith Vishwavidyalaya Indore, I, Dr. Anu Kande, feel privileged to welcome all the distinguished guests from industry and academia to Anand Amrit 2020 one-day virtual conference on the topic Positive Thinking and Happiness, Emerging Realities. I now invite the driving force that has taken the Center of Excellence in Happiness Studies to new achievements in the past 2 years, Dr. T.K. Mandal, convener Anand Amrit 2020, to speak about the conference. Sir, please.
Thank you, Anu. Chief guest, Sri Manu Srivastava ji. Special guest, Sri Norbu Wangchuk ji. Our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Upinder Dhar. Dr. Prabhat Pankaj, who is the Director of Jaipur Institute of Management, Jaipur. Dr. George Thomas, Director, Sri Vaishnav Institute of Management, Indore. Heads of various institutes of the Vaishnav, Sri Vaishnav Vidyapith Vishwavidyalaya, SVV. Distinguished faculty members from SVV and several other institutions around the country. Researchers, paper presenters, delegates, and students from across the country. A very warm welcome to all of you once again. It has been a turbulent journey coming to this day, all through, because of the disturbances that you all know. But finally, we could make it, and we have in our midst very distinguished guests in Mr. Manu Srivastava, Mr. Norbu Wangchuk, and Mr. Akhilesh Argal, besides Mr. Prabhat Pankaj and several other senior people. There was a time when there were uncertainties, but then I'm really thankful to all of them, particularly Mr. Srivastava and Mr. Wangchuk, who have accommodated us and are here today to tell us about their words of wisdom. Thank you, sirs, once again. With the current coronavirus pandemic, as you all know, this may not be the happiest time on earth, but that's no reason to forget what makes us happy. Happiness, as we all know, is a subject which has been dealt in great details by philosophers, psychologists, social scientists, and many others. In Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna enlightens Arjuna for attaining peace by saying, as the waters of different rivers enter the great ocean, which the fool on all sides remains undisturbed, likewise a person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires can alone achieve peace, and not the man who runs after these desires and strives to satisfy such desires. I quoted from a translation from Bhagavad Gita. Further, the Bhagavad Gita goes on to classify happiness in three folds. Pure happiness, as we know, sattvic, is pursuing sattvic or pure happiness requires a lot of practice and discipline. That is why it feels like poison in the beginning, but nectar at the end. It is said to be happiness in the mode of goodness. It is generated by the pure intellect that is situated in self-knowledge, Bhagavad Gita. The second classification Bhagavad Gita gives is known as Rajasic or result-oriented happiness. This is materialistic pleasure that is derived when the senses come in contact with external objects that create a feeling of gratification. However, this kind of happiness is temporary. Happiness is said to be in the mode of passion when it is derived from the contact of the senses with these objects. Such happiness is like nectar at first, but poison at the end. And the third classification of happiness as per Gita is slothful happiness or tamasic. This happiness is derived from sleeping or being lazy. The tiny sense of pleasure associated with it, people consider it to be a state of happiness. That happiness which covers the nature of the self from beginning to end and which is derived from sleep, indolence, and negligence. This is as per our Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavad Gita. We all also know that particularly in last few decades, most of the researchers, particularly from psychology, they have defined happiness in three distinct pathways. There are quite a few literatures available on this. The number one happiness that is known as pleasant life or hedonia. Hedonia involves positive experiences like contentment, hope, and sensory enjoyment. The second one is known as endemonia, which is also known as engaged life. Now, engaged life kind of happiness refers to using or utilizing one's strengths and talents in a way that absorbs him, sort of self-accomplishment, sense of accomplishment by doing something good. And the third one is meaningful life. This relates to the desire to be part of something bigger than oneself, to belong and contribute to an institution that has purpose. There are scores of literature available on how different people look at happiness differently. But all that I can say is happiness is becoming more and more a very, very broad and wide subject and becoming a business for everybody, apart from the psychologists, social scientists. In fact, from the collection of papers, from the contribution of papers that we have seen in the last two conferences, including this one, we can see contributors are from various walks of life, right from law to arts to fine arts, and so on and so forth. The World Happiness Report, as we again know, is an annual survey by Sustainable Development Solutions Network. And they do it for the United Nations every year, right, since 2012. And it looks at state of global happiness in 156 countries. And they rank countries on the basis of 6 factors: real GDP per capita. In fact, these are the measurable factors. There could be other factors which are still being researched upon by them. The 6 factors are real GDP per capita, social support, healthy life expectancy, freedom to make life choices, generosity, and perceptions of corruption among people. As I said, the World Happiness Report was launched first time in 2012. I have collected the ranks of India, the rankings India got in the last 6 happiness surveys. Unfortunately, as far as India is concerned, the rank actually slid. In 2015, it was 117. In 16, it was 118. In 17, it was 122. In 18, it was 133. 2019, 140 last year. And this year, in 2020, it has become 144 out of 156 countries, just to remind you. So that's the state of happiness index that India is in. And with the current kind of situation, the level of happiness is bound to go down all over the world. As far as Sri Vaishnava Vidyapit Vishwavidyalaya is concerned, we wanted to promote research in the area of happiness, and therefore the university instituted the Center of Excellence in Happiness Studies in 2018. And the first such conference that we had was last year in 2019, in April, to be precise, 27th of April in 2019, on the theme, Embracing Happiness for Rejuvenating Workplace Environment. And we had 11 sub-themes in last year's conference. There were 2 concurrent sessions. and 8 papers were presented in each conference session, making it total 16 papers. This year conference, actually, we had planned on the International Day of Happiness, that was on 20th March 2020. But unfortunately, the pandemic started by then, and we had to postpone the conference. Fortunately, we have this the help of technology today, and we are able to have it on this date online. As we all know, the theme of this year's conference is positive thinking and happiness, emerging realities. There are, as against 11 sub-themes of last year's conference, this year we have 15 sub-themes. And the responses also, as I said, is very encouraging. It has increased. We could sensitize people to work on happiness. There are some conceptual papers, there are some research papers, and altogether we have 24 papers to be presented in 3 concurrent sessions today. As I said, considering the present circumstances, difficult situation, almost everything is happening online. I'm sure you all would agree that it's an encouraging response. I must compliment sincerely all the authors who have contributed their work for this conference. Today's conference structure is like this. We have the inaugural session where we're going to hear Sri Wangchuk, a former education minister of the Kingdom of Bhutan, is also an exponent of in mindfulness, an academician who spearheads management education in Bhutan, and it will be delightful for all of us to hear him, sir. We are also eagerly waiting to hear Sri Srivastava-ji, who is very close to us, has been, as our Vice Chancellor was saying informally, the collector of Indore. He is a bureaucrat with a difference who is also an accomplished Sahityik. He has written several poems and some books. You'll get to know about this from his introduction, from his profile when it is read out. And he pioneers the Rajya Anand Sansthan of Madhya Pradesh. Incidentally, Madhya Pradesh is the first state to establish a full-fledged happiness department in the country. So he pioneers the Rajya Anand Sansthan as chairman of its executive committee, and we would like to hear him also in due course. We also shall be extremely privileged to hear Sri Akhilesh Argal, who is the CEO of Rajya Anand Sansthan, in his valedictory address sometime later after the presentation sessions are over. We have very distinguished session chairs and co-chairs. They're great wise men and women, and we're going to hear from some of them as well. This is an online conference for the first time that we are going to have, and many of us, the team, are handling it online for the first time. So there are there are a few chances of some hiccups cropping up, as we are also learning like the world, and we are also trying to quickly adapt to the new ways of life. As I read Prakash Iyer in a story called The Bridge of Choluteca. Choluteca is a river in Honduras. Excellent story. I'm sure some of you would have read it. So I'm sure everybody will tolerate us for the glitches if they occur during the conference. Finally, hoping to have a marvelous learning from the great speakers and the research papers to be presented during the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now, let us have the pleasure of listening to opening remarks of our dynamic, versatile, and inspirational Vice Chancellor, Sir, Dr. Upinder Dhar.
Good morning to all of you. At the outset, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to the chief guest, Sri Manoj Srivastava-ji, to very special guest, Sri Norbu Wangchuk-ji, Sri Akhilesh Argal-ji, my very close friend, Dr. Prabhat Pankaj, Dr. George, Dr. Gautam, all the directors of our various institutes, guests, and friends. Our state, Madhya Pradesh, MP, is the first state in our country which started Anand Vibhag, that means the Department of Happiness, few years back, which has been now transformed into an institute called Anand Sansthan. When this Anand Vibhag was established, that inspired us, in fact, to start the Center of Excellence in Happiness Studies in our young university. Our university is very young, it is only 5 years old, but our primary trust is 134 years old, 136 years old, because it was established in 1884 for doing the charitable activities. And it decided to come into education in 1951. So there are a number of institutions which were established, starting from schooling to higher education, that is colleges. And finally, in 2015, by the legislature, this university was established. When we were just beginning as a university, the major question that crossed our mind was that how are we going to be different from other universities or other educational institutions? One is to just to do what others are doing. Other thing is to do something different. So we chose the second option, do things differently and focus at offering quality education and of course, research. In this center we also established various centers of excellence for encouraging quality research. And one of those centers is Center of Excellence in Happiness Studies. Happiness is considered very important in life, and many research studies have been done to understand what happiness is. In 1998, that is 22 years back, I got an opportunity to visit Bhutan in the South Asian Management Forum, because I used to be, in fact, today also, I am the professor of management. And I got the opportunity to attend the South Asian Management Forum at Bhutan, which was organized by Royal Institute of Management. And for the first time, I came to know that in Bhutan, more preference is given to GHP than to GDP. So gross happiness product is considered more important than gross domestic product. So happiness is considered center of one's life. And that's what is happening across the world. People are looking for happiness. Now the question arises, why should people look for happiness? Why to worry about happiness? More important, maybe to take care of the survival needs. What in India we say, roti, kapda, makan. The physiological needs, basic needs should be fulfilled. Why should we look for happiness at all? If this question is asked, many people have tried to answer this question and explain, as even in ancient scriptures, even in religious scriptures, there is reference to the importance of happiness in one's life. If we go to the research studies done recently across the world, or even if we go slightly back, say Abraham Maslow's work, Maslow considered needs as basic requirement, fulfillment of needs as the basic requirement in one's life. He talked about physiological needs, he talked about security and safety needs, social needs, esteem needs, and self-actualization. So happiness, if happiness is a self-actualization need, that is ultimately one has to get the happiness, then is one required to fulfill these basic needs first and then aspire for the happiness? But recent researches do not support this contention. If we look into the work done by Andrew Clark, titled Origins of Happiness, where from does the happiness come? How can we draw happiness? From what can we draw happiness? What are the origins of happiness? So based on his study, he and his team interpreted that wealth perhaps is not the origin of, is not a major reason for happiness. There are certain people who may say that wealth or income is not important at all. But then there is another group of people who may say, no, it is health and income that brings happiness. So one may aspire for, say, another car, one may aspire for another house, one may aspire for another pair of shoes. But does that give happiness? Well, researchers say that it may, but that may not be long lasting. That may give some kind of joy, but it may not be long lasting that we could say that it is the happiness, it is the state of happiness. The state of happiness refers to the state of mind, the well-being, how good one feels at any given time.
हेलो अच्छा पावर कट ना हाँ
Dr. George, what is the news? Is this going to resume soon or is going to take some time? You have to unmute.
It's a power failure.
Okay.
So they have already fixed it. Now it will be coming very soon.
Okay. So we are resuming soon.
Yeah, yeah, we're resuming soon.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Yeah, I'm sorry there was electricity was not there. There was a breakdown. Well, perhaps these things make one unhappy when such interruptions are there. Well, resuming from where I was talking, so researchers say that, well, wealth may not be contributing much. And as per the Clark's work, wealth or income contributes only 2% of variance to the happiness. So wealth has a role, income has a role, money has a role, but but at the same time, it is not a major contributor to success, to happiness. It is not a major contributor to, it is not a major origin for happiness. It has an importance, but not at number one. Then comes health. What about health? So it has been found that yes, health is more powerful variable. So physical health and mental health, it is more powerful variable than only income. Thirdly, relationships. So relationship in the family, relationship with one's colleagues, friends, and so on. Relationships play a very, very significant role. So relationships, health, and then income. If we see them in that order, they contribute very significantly to the state of happiness of an individual. If a person is able to maintain healthy relations with people around, the state of happiness sustains. It sustains for a long time, and one can maintain relations if one has social skills. You see, when I was studying in school, say 50 years back, when I was in school, we were taught that if wealth is lost, nothing is lost. One can again one can work hard and generate the wealth. If health is lost, something is lost. One has to worry about it. One has to be concerned about it, see to it that one does not become unhealthy. So one should be healthy. Thirdly, if character is lost, everything is lost. Therefore, why I'm mentioning it, because relationship plays a very significant role, and their character is a very important determinant of the relationship with people. If one is able to have a clean and superior and good character, relationships are likely to be good. And if relationships are good, the state of happiness can sustain. So these are some of the recent findings which have been reported in The Origins of Happiness by Andrew Clark and his colleagues in 2018. Only 2 years back, this has been published by conducting a study across various nations. Now, one good thing is that more researchers, more academicians are developing interest in this, in studying what happiness is, why we should look for happiness, and what should we do. Even some recent, I have seen some studies where people are advising that one should do do's and don'ts. Say, get up early in the morning and then go for the exercise and so on. So a schedule, if one follows a schedule, then one may be able to be happy. But then if we go by research, it doesn't support it, because very soon a person develops boredom. It becomes boring to do the same routine again and again. So there is a lot to learn in this area, in this field. Therefore, that's what makes our Anand Sansthan very relevant and has a very high level of importance. It is very very nice of our state that this department was established a few years back, and drawing from that, here at our level and in the university, we are continuously having one or the other programs, and this happens to be the second conference on happiness. In fact, as Dr. Mandal was mentioning, that COVID-19 has disrupted businesses across the world, and to some extent it has also brought unhappiness with it because of the pandemic. This has come, it will go, but then how to maintain the state of well-being, that is very important. Now, not standing before our audience who are very eager to listen to Manoj Srivastava ji as well as Norbu Wangchuk ji. So I wish happy conference to all those who are attending, and happy learning to everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your inspirational words. I now request the dignitaries to release the souvenir of today's conference.
Should we consider it as released?
Yes.
Okay.
We have the rare advantage to have with us as chief guest Sri Manoj Srivastava, Additional Chief Secretary and Chairman, Executive Council, Rajya Anand Sansthan, MP. Before I invite him to address the gathering, I have the honor to share a brief note about him. Sri Manoj Srivastav, IAS 1987 batch, has studied post-graduation in Hindi literature. Initially, he was assistant professor in Sagar. He also served as assistant commissioner Income Tax Department, Mumbai in 1987. He was selected in Indian Administrative Services in 1987 itself. During his tenure in MP, he was SDO at Mau, Indore and Purai, Sagar. Additional Collector Sagar, Raipur and Jashpur. He also administered municipal corporations in Sagar and Raipur. He was posted as District Collector Mandsaur, Jhabua, Rajgarh, Indore. Other important posts held by him were IG, Stamp and Registry, Chairman and Managing Director, Madhya Pradesh Power Supply Company Western Region, Commissioner, Land Records Department, Commissioner, Excise Department, Member, Board of Revenue, Commissioner and Secretary, Public Relations, Cultural Secretary, Trustee Secretary, Bharat Bhavan, Ayukt, Bhopal, Narmadapur Division, Principal Secretary, Revenue, MP Government Bhopal, Principal Secretary, CM, MP Government Bhopal, Principal Secretary, Commercial Tax, Culture and Religious Affairs, Additional Chief Secretary, Animal Husbandry Department, presently Additional Chief Secretary, Rural Development and Spirituality Department. Sri Manoj Srivastav has many poetry collections to his credit, including Meri Diary Se, Yadon Ke Sandarbh, Pashupati, Swarankiत, पुराण कविताएं, माँ, हिरण्यगर्भा, क्षितिज को आंगन बुलाते हुए, कुंभ कविताएं. Many books have also been written by him, including शिक्षा में संदर्भ और मूल्य, पंचशील, पहाड़ी कोरबा, व्यतीत वर्तमान और विभव, वंदे मातरम, यथाकाल, सुंदरकांड 18 खंड, शक्ति प्रसंग, Ganesh, alag-alag gannaएं. Some awards that are to his credit include Bharatiya Sanskritik Sambandh Parishad एवं नेहरू केंद्र लंदन द्वारा अंतर्राष्ट्रीय वातायन पुरस्कार से सम्मानित, सुंदरकांड पर लिखी गई पुस्तक संत समाज द्वारा अयोध्या में राम किंकर पुरस्कार से सम्मानित. Now, I request our chief guest, Sri Manoj Srivastav, for sharing his wisdom with us. Sir, please.
Honorable Shri Vangchuk ji, Dr. Dhar, Dr. Charge, Dr. Prabhat, Dr. Anu Khande, and all friends. First of all, let me congratulate the university for organizing this webinar in the wake of COVID. This is the time most opportune when we need to stay particularly calm. We cannot control what happens, but can control how we react to it. We do not need to convert quarantine into a pause. They say, if you are going through hell, keep going. You will come out of it. And that is what precisely being done through this seminar. And I am happy to join with you today in this. I'm Additional Chief Secretary, Adhyatma and Rural Development. Earlier, I was Additional Chief Secretary, Culture, and at that time, we inaugurated this Sanchi University, where from Bhutan, the king came, and he was the one who introduced this idea of gross national happiness to our CM. I was at that time Principal Secretary to CM also. So that's how it all started in Madhya Pradesh. And for this particular reason, I am thankful to the representative from Bhutan, who is our guest of honor today. Now, friends, as Additional Chief Secretary Adhyatma, I was thinking, what would one do if one would have been in my shoes? So I want to show you how we and what we could do in our government. That time when the discussion took place between Bhutan and MP representatives, that time I told my CM that that famous line of Thomas Jefferson, that happiness is the first and only legitimate object of good government. And that is something which keeps us aspiring all the time. As it was told about me that I have written several books. So I would like to quote one particular poem of my fellow poet Viren Gangwal. He says, बेईमान सजे धजे हैं, बेईमान सजे धजे हैं, तो क्या हम मान लें कि बेईमानी ही खुशी है? कातिल मजे में हैं, तो क्या हम मान लें कि कत्ल करना मजेदार काम है? मसला मनुष्य का है, इसलिए हम तो हरगिज नहीं मानेंगे कि मनुष्य बना है रहने के लिए उदास, खुशी और दूसरी जगहों पर. So what we do in our department of Adhyatma, or for that matter, the erstwhile department of Anand, I do a virtue-based definition of happiness. We in our department of happiness published a happiness calendar, an Anand Panchang, where for each month a particular virtue has been earmarked and allocated. And every month activities related to that virtue are to be taken up. The virtues mentioned in this calendar, some of you might have seen this calendar, are those of gratitude, altruism, kindness, awareness, forgiveness, acceptance, learning, etc. Friends, Coleridge was of the view that happiness can be built only on virtue and must of necessity have truth for foundation. Similar opinion was voiced by Bulwer. Happiness and virtue rest upon each other. The best are not only the happiest, but the happiest are usually the best. Haber also had an identical take when he said, I question death, who you are. He said, I am happiness. If virtue guides thee here. So the way happiness is dependent on virtues reminds me of the way dharma is represented in Indian religio-spiritual traditions. Manu has described dharma having 10 virtues. Dhati, Shama, Damosteyam, Shocham, Indriya, Nigraha, Dhir, Vidya, Satyam, Akrodho, Dashakam, Dharma, Lakshanam. And Yagyavalkya has also defined it having 9 virtues. Ahimsa, Satyam, Asteyam, Shocham, Indriya, Nigraha, Danam, Damo, Daya, Shanti, Sarvesham, Dharma, Sadhanam. Srimad Bhagavad, in its 7th book, gives a count of 30 virtues to be treated as Sanatana Dharma. And Vidur in Mahabharata spells out 8 virtues symptomatic of Dharma. So what I want to convey here is that to be virtuous is to be religious, and to be religious is to be happy. That is why Anand department of erstwhile government of Madhya Pradesh got subsumed in the department of Adhyatma, department of spirituality. Religion in Indian tradition was never an ascription or insignia. It neither was book-centered nor was prophet-centric. It was not a colophon, but a cultivation of virtues it was. Take the example of one Indian virtue called Dan. Remember Saint Francis of Assisi? Saint Francis of Assisi, he used to say, for it is in giving that we receive. Mother Teresa said, it is not how much we give, but how much love we put into giving. We know of the story of Karna in Mahabharata. His life was so full of frustrations, sorrows, discouragements, and complexes that made him want a psychological compensation, a happiness in being Madani. So if happiness didn't result from what he got, it came out in the open from what he gave. Every sunrise for him was an invitation to arise and brighten someone's day, a real work of a Surya Putra. So we have based many of our activities on this one mark, one trait, one virtue of Dan. We have initiated and established a scheme called Neki Ki Diva. Under this, we have designated places where you can leave your surplus goods for good. And with people depositing their things there in this center, any needy person can come and pick up the item to satisfy his need. We call it the joy of giving. So far, 165 such centers are being run. Another initiative is that of Senior Citizen Voluntary Discount Disclosure Scheme, wherein many establishments, shops, hotels, hospitals, etc. declare on their own a special discount, which at times run to the tune of 50% in favor of their clients who happen to be senior citizens. A third scheme that we have only very recently coined is that of Time Bank. Time Bank is a reciprocal service exchange which uses units of time as a currency. Earlier in October 2018, a panel of NHRC had recommended the Time Bank scheme to take care of senior citizens who are living alone without any support from their family. So there may be many examples of giving. And if not anything else, you may give a smile. So one can thus take one virtue after another to weave a network of programs around them. Take another virtue, gratitude. To not spoil what you have by desiring what you have not. We can complain because rose bushes have thorns, or rejoice because thorns have roses. So we can plan many activities around this virtue of gratitude. This demands that we must find time to stop and thank the people who have made a difference in our lives. If the only prayer we say is thank you, that is enough. Being grateful does not mean that everything is necessarily good. It just means that we can accept it as a gift. In India, we have three forms of showing gratitude. We have to make good of whatever we have borrowed in our life. And a borrower who does not repay in India is called a beggar. So there is this concept of three rins: Rishi Rin, Pitra Rin, Deva Rin. Now we can schematize around this Rishi Rin. If our teacher has taught us, how will we pay back? Rishi Rin is not Dakshina. It is not even compensation. It is not reciprocation. If we really feel indebted to our teacher, we may do many things for defraying the favor. can visit the teacher after so long, can help him in his old age or in his adverse circumstances now, can help any teacher for that matter, can help that school or college in the precincts of which we grew up. If not our alma mater, then any brainary, any college, any school, any academy, any library can sponsor education of any boy or girl in penury, in adversity, to complete her education, can institute any number of prizes for the children who achieve a certain percentage, can provide scholarships for the needy, can teach in schools running short of staff, can write a book, can run education program. Think of this just one reading, and one finds ways to feel happy. Scientific research provides compelling data to support the anecdotal evidence that giving and helping others is a powerful pathway to lasting happiness. An act of goodness is of itself an act of happiness. No reward coming after can compare with the sweet reward that went with it. So that's how we are designing our programs. In our department of Anand, we have sought the services of happiness volunteers called Anand. We have some 52,000 Anandaks registered with us. They are expected to be the change that they want. We also run an introspective and cathartic program called Alpaviram. This is to let us loosen up some time and take a break to recalibrate our life. Taking a break can lead to breakthroughs, we believe. So we decompress through this Alpaviram. We also help people get trained in happiness at some very respectable institutions. Every year from 14 January, we celebrate Anandotsav. This year we had it at 1,037 places, 895 of which were village areas. The theme this year was Be Yourself. What I have observed that forces of an aggressive globalization and the colonial experience of the past have cast in us a particular habit of spitting in the mirror. So we hate our language, we hate our food, we hate our sports, we hate our folk dances. In this particular Anandotsav that we celebrated this year, we organized events of indigenous food melas, we had native sports and folk performances. I told them, it is okay if you express in your own dialect. You may not have command over English and Hindi, but you can always refuse to be reduced by it. Follow your inner moonlight. You're all you have. So that's how we celebrated this Anandotsav. We also have 401 Ananda clubs in the states formed so far. In the secondary schools, we are converting traditional Bal Sabhas into Ananda Sabhas. We have developed different modules for the purpose. We also organize happiness camps in the state. We instituted happiness research fellowships, and we are running Aloha video course designed by Indian School of Business, Hyderabad. We have organized Ananda conventions in 48 districts of the state. Every month, we have a particular international day celebrated. Like in September, we had World Suicide Prevention Day, and we held depression workshops in different places. Suicide to us is the exact opposite of Ananda. October, we celebrated International Senior Citizen Day, November, International Tolerance Day, December, International Voluntary Service Day, up to say March, International Happiness Day. Likewise, we also associated ourselves with the cultural calendar of our country. So we observed Har Ghar Diwali, and Holi, that itself is a festival of happiness. So we do not say we have done enough. We do not get much funds from the state government, and we do not regret it also. Happiness is something that money cannot buy. Happiness, in our view, is dependent on the test and not on things. To us, where there is less pay, there is also less pain. So friend, in the end, I would thank the organizers. I would thank the university for giving me this opportunity to share my experiences with you all. Yale University, in its long 3-century-old history, has initiated a course that proved the most popular course in the history, that is the science of well-being. So taking a cue from that, I have written to many universities of the state to start a course on happiness. And I'm really grateful that I found this university has that course. All the very best, friends.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your valuable insights with us. Gross national happiness is a philosophy that guides the government of Bhutan. It includes an index which is used to measure the collective happiness and well-being of the population. We have the pleasure to have with us today Sri Norbu Wangchuk, former Education Minister, Royal Government of Bhutan, also known as the Kingdom of Happiness. Sri Norbu Wangchuk specializes in studying happiness as a development philosophy, which is Bhutan's development model, articulated as gross national happiness. Norbu Wangchuk is actively engaged in promoting mindfulness and emotional intelligence in the country and worldwide. As a passionate educationist, presently he is engaged in empowering younger generations on emotional well-being by organizing workshops and training programs. He also spends his time engaging the corporate world in mindfulness meditation as a core business strategy for the 21st century economy. As the Minister for Education, Sri Norbu Wangchuk led the initiative to reform Bhutan's education. The reform targeted on aligning the school curriculum to the needs of the 21st century with special focus on emotional well-being and Bhutanese values. Teacher development also received a major impetus under the educational reform initiated during his tenure as the Education Minister. As an ardent academician, Sri Norbu Wangchuk wrote and published several papers such as Gross National Happiness, The Practice and the Philosophy, Globalization, A Challenge to Gross National Happiness. He also developed the curriculum for educating for gross national happiness, which was implemented in all the schools in Bhutan. Sri Norbu Wangchuk has co-founded the premier training institution for Management Studies Limited, IMSL. Today, IMSL offers training and conducts studies on capacity development needs of the country. With keen interest in facilitating and conducting training, Sri Norbu Wangchuk conducted several national and regional training programs on leadership with special focus on mindfulness. Now, I request our special guest, Sri Norbu Wangchuk, to please address the audience.
Thank you, Dr. Anu. Dr. Anu, I would be sharing some slides. Is the present slide visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Anu. First of all, a very warm greetings and a lot of happiness from the Kingdom of Bhutan to all the eminent participants to this very important conference on happiness. It gives me immense joy to be a participant and having this conversation with you. Of course, it is a delight for me to share what little story that we have of gross national happiness from the Kingdom of Bhutan. Well, before I begin my presentation, let me clarify that not all of us are always happy in Bhutan. We have our own share of pain and suffering, and we are no different from any society around the world. Perhaps the little difference maybe is that Bhutan as a society, we take happiness very, very seriously. The Vice Chancellor in his presentation mentioned his experience in Bhutan and how the Bhutanese government and individual citizens take happiness very seriously. And perhaps that is the difference. Well, as I said, every Bhutanese, like everybody else around the world, we have our share of pain and suffering. And this is a journey that is continuing to deal with pain and suffering. And in that journey, this little story that every Bhutanese knows by heart, I think that in a way has helped us to deal with the worldly pains and suffering. And that's a story where a great saint has said, if the world is filled with thorns, and if you have to travel the world, well, the best method is to have a leather and stitch a slipper, put on the slippers and travel the world. And I guess this little story has been inspirational, and this little story is embedded in the DNA of most Bhutanese. And this story, in a way, has several layers. It informs us at several layers. One is that happiness is at one level ending the misery or dealing with pain and suffering. But then that would be an inadequate view of happiness. And so therefore, the other level or other dimension of happiness is that with that leather shoes that you have now, you tread on the world and live a flourishing life as you travel around the world. And so happiness in that sense is not only ending pain and suffering, dealing with pain and suffering, but also make an attempt at living a flourishing life, a life where you discover your own potential and try to fulfill that potential. And I guess for centuries, Bhutan as a society, our engagement has been to pursue that happiness, what is now come to be known, articulated around the world as gross national happiness. And Bhutan's philosophy of gross national happiness is founded on some ideas that we deeply believe in, and one of which is that a nation's goal, an individual's goal, is to pursue happiness, and that happiness is a worthwhile pursuit, is a worthwhile goal. And so therefore in Bhutan, our constitution has actually mandated the government that the ultimate goal of the government should be to enable and empower citizens to pursue their own, maybe subjective happiness. Gross national happiness is also founded on this belief, on this idea that our happiness really is dependent on the happiness of all around us. And I think I can totally agree with Vice Chancellor when he mentioned that the importance of relationship. And I think this importance of relationship is really underscored in this gross national happiness idea, that you can only be happy only when your spouse is happy, your children are happy, only when your community is happy, your colleague citizens are happy, that the world around is happy. You cannot be happy when all around us, all around the world is in pain and suffering and in misery. So that is a very important idea that is embedded in this idea about the gross national happiness. And so this relationship again extends beyond the relationship between humans and humans, and is also a relationship that extends to the other species, the other being. And therefore, if you had visited Bhutan, you would have immediately noticed the deep reverence that we have for our environment. And so the deep respect for environments emerges from this belief that human beings are just one species among all others, that this world, that this planet, that this ecosystem is has an equal shared ownership of all other species as well. So this relationship, the human and the other species relationship with this ecosystem, perhaps is something that is different, especially different from how the West would view their environment. And so our view of environment is that, yes, it is for sustenance, but it is also a source of joy, a source of happiness, that it does not belong only to us, that it does not belong only to the present generation. The other idea which gives this foundation for this idea of gross national happiness is the importance of tradition and culture. That our tradition and culture is an anchor for identity, identity for the self, identity as a nation. And to me, it makes a lot of sense where we are now living in a world where most people who suffer from helplessness, hopelessness, are in many ways, are in a way are losing their identity. So yes, we have this identity of a nationhood, but this identity can also be extended to identity as a global citizen. So these are important ideas where the gross national happiness finds the source of its idea. At the heart of this story of gross national, Bhutan's story of happiness, is our fourth king, and the fourth king who gave the first articulation of this phrase called gross national happiness. And in fact, in the story where at Bombay now, where he was confronted by the journalist, and when the journalist wanted to know from him the GDP growth rate of our country. And during those times, we never measured gross domestic product, GDP growth rate, where he told the journalist that for Bhutan, gross national happiness is more important than gross national product. And he had really juxtaposed gross national happiness with gross domestic product, emphasizing that for Bhutan, GNH is important, more important than GDP. And perhaps he would be seen, because it was sometime around in 1974, 1972, in fact, when the entire world was singing the song of GDP growth rate. Everybody was basking in the glory of the economic progress and economic development. And here was a tiny kingdom's king who professed that gross national happiness must also find space in the economic model. And perhaps he was the first of the critic on GDP. Actually, it turns out that there was another critic at the other side of the world, in Robert Kennedy. For the first time around late 1960s, he was critic in the sense that he said GDP measures everything except that which is worthwhile. And so, so there was somebody who who also believed that there's something more to be done with the focus on the GDP only. And he said something along those lines that GDP counts special locks for our doors, and it also counts the jails for the people who break them. But it does not include such things as, I know our chief guest would like it, Manoj ji would like it, when he said, it does not include the beauty of our poetry or the strength of our marriage, the intelligence of our public debates, or the integrity of our public officials. And GDP today measures a fallen tree, and it does not value a tree that is standing. And so GDP does not account for the contributions of sequestering our forests, sequestering carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and giving out oxygen into the environment. So this is what Robert Kennedy and the fourth king felt about the GDP model of development. But to be fair to GDP growth model, the GDP growth model had contributed immensely to uplifting the suffering and pain from our world. Today, all of us, all around the world, live long and live more healthy compared to a century back, compared to 50 years back. And the babies born of us today has greater chance today of living a full life. The infant mortality rate has decreased terribly. Extreme poverty has decreased. I have the figure here in 1960 from 22% of the whole global population lived under extreme poverty, and today it is reduced to just about 8%. So these are contributions of GDP, the economic model that we cannot shoo away. So this is a deserving credit we must give to GDP. However, along this journey of the GDP growth model, something somewhere had been missed. And the byproduct, or one of the consequences today of the GDP growth model, is are things like now the mental issues of mental health. And I was looking at one of the reports of mental health, and the stress level in India, for instance, stands at the highest, globally highest in India. The kind of 21st century world that we have designed for ourselves with this cutthroat competition has elevated the stress level to a great degree. The environmental degradation, the climate change, and the distrust and the conflict that we see around the world are some of the inequalities of growth and development, are some of the consequences of this GDP growth model. And in fact, economic experts now warn us that to be continuing this journey of GDP is going to cost us the planetary proportions, that it is unsustainable. And so in sometime around 2008, the Ban Ki-moon, the UN General Secretary, is now a former UN Secretary General. He had to make this announcement to the world that the old model is broken and we need to create a new one. And the old model, the GDP, had served us, but now we cannot go on with the GDP model. We need to create a new model of development for us. So the GDP model, which was based on consumption and consumption and consumption, which has created for us actually mindless consumption. the corporates and the manufacturing productions extracting, unsustainably extracting and creating pollution, and again extracting, production, and this this cycle going on and on and on. And this has become now a cause of great concern for us. So for Bhutan, our gross national happiness model, as opposed to the GDP growth model, is based on this idea that the purpose of life for all individuals, for all human beings, is to be happy, and that government's role is to empower its citizens for happiness. And I think the sharp contrast with GDP, between GDP and GNH, is that the material pursuit alone will not deliver happiness. And I think I do not need to elaborate more, because Manoj ji and our Vice Chancellor had amply explained how only the physical pursuit, the material pursuit, does not deliver happiness, that human beings have other needs, that other dimensions, the spiritual need, the emotional need, the cultural need, the social need, which are perhaps as, if not as equally important, perhaps more important than just the physical need. So for Bhutan, the happiness is founded on 9 domains. Some of the domains are very familiar with the GDP domain, or the happiness, the Human Development Index domain. Health, Vice Chancellor mentioned that if health is lost, something is lost, and how true. And so in Bhutan, the health dimension receives a lot of emphasis, and we also view health as so important that any citizens, that is a basic constitutional right to have access to good health. And just because you don't have the means and the resources, you should not be deprived of this important need. And so the health facilities are made completely free of cost. And in fact, any citizens of Bhutan needing operations such as heart surgery, for instance, while we do not have it in Bhutan, it is the expenses are borne by the government and sent to hospitals in India. So this is important variable of happiness. On education front, the focus is not just on cognitive education, just making children smart doctors and smart engineers, but also the focus on creating individuals who are compassionate beings, who have this happiness in their minds. And so it's not just the skilled doctors, but compassionate doctors, compassionate engineers. So a lot of emphasis on emotional intelligence, the spiritual dimension, the good values of life. Living standards. So our gross national happiness model does not reject economic development and economic progress, but trying to balance out economic development to the extent of meeting the needs of the government's resources to fulfill all other dimensions of happiness. So good governance, as I mentioned, happiness is not just eliminating pain and suffering, but also ensuring that people are enabled to follow their passion, to follow their potential. And so good governance enabling everybody to fulfill their potential. And so environment, I'll not elaborate more on the environment, the unique relationship of human beings to its environment. That environment is not a subservient, a slave of the human being, but deserving the respect. So this unique relationship between people and environment. psychological well-being, extremely important as well. Community vitality. We talked about relationship. Dr. Upinder Dar talked about the importance of relationship. So relationships existing within the community, whether it is the community of the home, community in the villages, community as a nation, that there must be this vitality to enhance and deepen this relationship. The culture promotion, the tradition and culture, extremely important to give the sense of, to give this anchor for identity at an individual, at the national level. Then perhaps what is different from many other indices of happiness is the time use, that we spend time on something that is meaningful, something that contributes to the individual and the nation's happiness. So in gist, these are the 9 domains that the governance and the individual to focus on in their pursuit for happiness. Many questions are asked whether the gross national happiness is at the philosophical, at an abstract level only. How does it look like when it is actually implemented practically by the government and by organizations? So actually, there is this some systemic structure built in to enable that gross national happiness is implemented by the government. Firstly, the constitution mandates that the government must promote conditions for happiness. Then we have what is almost an equivalent of a ministry. We call it the commission, and Gross National Happiness Commission Council prepares the 5 years budget, and they allocate the budget based on these dimensions of gross national happiness. And we also have what is called the policy screening tool, where every policy tool, policy instrument, such as maybe the mining policy or the education policy or the economic development policy, have to be viewed through this gross national happiness policy, and they have to, what we call, they have to pass, like in an exam, pass the policy screening test, then only they get approved to be implemented. And we also have the periodic gross national happiness surveys, like most economists would measure GDP, we measure the G and H. I'll skip this. So the question coming to the conclusion is GNH working for Bhutan? Is gross national happiness model working for Bhutan? Well, so far we are encouraged that our model seems to be working, while there are challenges of being amongst the global economy, and economy now today very integrated. But there are signs that suggest to us that it is working. We are able to maintain our forest cover. 70% of our land mass is under forest cover. We are a carbon negative country. Our rich are not too rich and our poor are not too poor. So this sense of inequality is at the very, very minimum. Then the culture and tradition is very vibrant here. Our culture, our tradition are not in the museum. They are actually lived robustly, part of everyday the life of every single Bhutanese. So you can see that I'm wearing my national dress, and every day to my office, I wear this with pride. It gives me a sense of identity as a Bhutanese. And in the latest survey, 93% of the Bhutanese had reported that they feel happy. So these are some maybe loose indicators that suggest to us that GDP model is working for Bhutan. But then now the other bigger question is, will gross national happiness model work for the world? And at the first place, this is a model which was never designed for the world. It was designed for ourselves only. And we are not even suggesting that this is a model that the world must look into. Every country is different, different with differences in the development level, with differences in the political goals and differences in the social goals that they pursue. So we even do not know whether GNH will continue to work for Bhutan. But what we do know for sure is that we need to have a development model, an alternate development model from the existing or the past model that we had based our journey so far. Because the past model had served us well, but the past model is unsustainable. And in the words of Ban Ki-moon, the UN General Secretary, the past model, the old model is broken. And to be mindlessly pursuing the old model would be a reckless trample over this planet at the perilous cost of the present generation and the future generation as well. And because this is a happiness conference, I would also like to mention that this happiness is now science has caught up with what Bhagavad Gita and what some of the Buddhist heritage had all along been telling us, that happiness is within us, that happiness can be manufactured, that while the government and the society at large can create conditions for happiness, at an individual level, happiness is a skill that we can manufacture happiness. And so in Bhutan, very recently, in all our school system, we have something like 10,000 teachers. We have embarked on this journey of teaching every single teacher the skill of happiness, and that is neuroscience-based mindfulness practices. So the results are very, very encouraging. And in fact, when we did an impact survey, we found that our teachers are now reporting that they're able to recognize their negative thoughts when the negative thoughts arise. And this surely is a first step in dealing with the negative thoughts. And when interacting with others, the teacher said that they're aware of that emotional state, with what emotional state they are dealing with, and the emotional state of the other person. So these are important first steps, the grounds of cultivating happiness individually. And in terms of using the skill, using techniques to calm yourself in stressful situations, and teachers reported now that they are able to use this skill. And so, as I mentioned earlier, Bhutan is a society where individually and as a society, we take this happiness seriously. It is embedded into our economic development plans. It is embedded into our national development plan. It is embedded into our school systems. So with this last few words, may I congratulate the university for organizing this very important conference on happiness, and living in a pandemic situation as we are. And this is perhaps more important time and very timely that we do not stray away from happiness. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And I wish you a productive and a successful happiness conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for sharing with us your deep insights about today's topic. Now I request Dr. Rupa Shinde, co-coordinator Anand Amrit-2020, to propose words of thanks.
I deem it a great honor to propose words of thanks on behalf of Shri Vaishnav Vidyapeeth Vishwavidyalaya Indore on the occasion of Anand Amrit 2020. First of all, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to our esteemed chief guest, Shri Manoj Srivastav, Chairman Executive Committee, Rajya Anand Sansthan, and Additional Chief Secretary, Government of MP. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation in spite of your busy schedule. Your presence today is a great source of inspiration and motivation for us. I sincerely thank our special guest, Sri Norbu Wangchuk, former Education Minister, Royal Government of Bhutan, for kindly accepting our invitation and gracing the inaugural function. I place on record my deep sense of gratitude to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Upinder Dhar, who is always a source of encouragement and in promoting research activities in the university. He is the central force behind all the innovative practices adopted in our university. Thank you, sir, for your constant support and guidance. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome and thank all distinguished chairs and guests, Shri Akhilesh Argal, Chief Executive Officer, Rajya Anand Sansthan, Government of MP, Dr. Prabhat Pankaj, Director, Jaipuria Institute of Management, Jaipur, Dr. Samira Naeem, Rajya Anand Sansthan, Dr. Alok Verma, MET Law School, Noida, Dr. George Thomas, Director, Sri Vaishnav Institute of Management, Indore, Dr. MP Gautam, Professor, Sri Vaishnav Institute of Forensic Science, Indore, Dr. Rajiv Shukla, Director, Sri Vaishnav School of Management, Indore, who graciously accepted our invitation to grace the conference. I would also like to extend my sincere thanks to Dr. T.K. Mandal, Convener Anand Amrit and Coordinator, Center of Excellence in Happiness Studies, for his continuous guidance, support, and active involvement to make this conference a reality. My deep respect to you, sir. My grateful thanks to all the delegates who have contributed their research papers for the conference. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of very motivated and dedicated colleagues and committee members. I thank everyone for the involvement they have shown and the willingness they have expressed in the completion of tasks beyond their comfort zones. Last but not the least, I would like to thank our informed audience without whose participation and involvement, no such event is complete. Thank you once again. Over to you, Anu ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. With this, we conclude the inaugural session. I request all present to join us for our technical sessions after a 40 minutes lunch break on the concurrent sessions link given in the program schedule. Also, we shall have the valedictory session at 3:30 p.m. on the Zoom platform again. So hope to see you again. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wangchuk sir. Thank you, Srivastava ji. So nice of you. Thank you, Pankaj ji. He'll be again coming back. It has been a great
session,
great
and there was a lot of learning from Manoj ji's session, because I was really astonished to see how much work this center is doing in Madhya Pradesh.
Yes.
I was really so happy to listen to that, and I would like to be associated with it, sir. Manoj sir, if you can, allow me to get back to you with your email ID and others. So I would like to share some of the work that we are doing. And you were referring about the course on happiness and well-being. So for your information, we have launched this course. We are teaching it from last 2 years in our institute. And we have been doing a lot of work in, I had this opportunity of working in Bhutan for more than 6 years. And I'm blessed with all the dignitaries from Bhutan who are the source of my inspiration and knowledge. I'm really grateful to Norbu Wangchuk sir that he has spared his time, and despite his busy schedule, he has been able to join this program. So we'll be in touch, and we can do a lot of work actually together.
Sure, Prabhat ji.
Excellent. Manoj ji, thank you so much.
Thanks, sir.
We'll be hearing Akhilesh ji in the evening.
And Prabhat ji, be given my mobile number 94251
I'll share with him, sir.
Yeah, I'll take it from Mandal sir.
Sure.
I'll give it.
Yeah, sure, sir.
Okay, then. Thank you.
Right.
Bye.
Thank you,
All
sir.
the best.
Bye.
Bye, Dr. Dhar.
Bye. Thank you.